So the days leading up to the race, you probably have heard of the term carbo loading. And the issue I have with that term is that it implies it's only important to get enough carbs in the few days leading up to the race. It's definitely more important to get enough carbs throughout your months of training than it is just the few days before the race. But basically, how we would go about getting ready for race day, during taper week, your running volume is going to be a little bit less, but we want to continue to eat the same amount of food. And this is super important because this is how we're going to build up those energy stores for race day. This is actually part of the carbo loading process. So if we start eating less because we're training less, we end up showing up to the start line underfueled, which is not going to help you perform your best on race day. A lot of runners feel concerned about gaining weight in the week leading up to the race, and that's really not going to happen. If you do notice any shift in weight, a lot of times that's due to increasing the energy that you have stored in your muscles. So for every 3 grams of glycogen that we store, we also store a gram of water. And so that's going to increase water weight because we're storing more fuel, but that will go away as we use up the fuel during the race. So it's not any true change in weight. It's nothing that's going to slow you down or negatively impact performance. If anything, it's going to actually help you. So don't be afraid of weight changes in that week leading up to the race. It's much more important to fuel properly than to restrict because you're training a little bit less. So continuing to have about half your plate coming from carbs, continuing to eat every 3 to 4 hours and having those balanced snacks. And then the 3 days out from the race, this is when we can just slightly increase the amount of carbs that we're eating. So basically all this would look like would be adding an extra serving of carbs to your meals and snacks. So if you're going to have, toast at breakfast, maybe we throw in one more piece of toast there. We add a glass of juice to get some carbs. If you're having, rice or pasta at dinner, add an extra scoop or 2 of that just to get some extra carbs in there. But really about 3 days out is when you want to start increasing the amount of carbs that you're eating to carbo load. The rest of the time you should be eating about the same, even during taper week. The other thing that we can do starting about 2 days out from the race is something called electrolyte loading. So it's probably going to be pretty hot and humid on race day. So it's really important that you prepare by hydrating well. A danger in the marathon is drinking too much water and not getting enough electrolytes. That can cause something called hyponatremia, which can be really dangerous. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough electrolytes to actually absorb that water and keep our body in a state of electrolyte balance to help keep your heart rate steady, your breathing steady, all that kind of stuff. So 2 days out from the race, you can aim for about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium from a sports drink. So if you have ever heard of the product Element, LMNT, that one has about 1,000 milligrams of sodium in a serving. You can do 1 to 2 of those 2 days out. If you prefer something like Noon, that would be about 3 to 5 Noon tablets, which is quite a few those days out. Liquid IV, that would be about 2 to 4 liquid IV packets. So somewhere around there, about 2 days out from the race. The day before the race, you can do a little bit more than that. So you can do anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 milligrams of sodium from electrolyte drinks. So this, again, would be, just an extra serving of some of those drinks I mentioned before. The key here is that you don't want to be drinking more water than you've ever drank in your life the day before the race, because that's going to dilute things too much. But, aim for around 100 ounces of fluid. If you're somebody you sweat a lot or you're a bigger person, you may need more than that, but that's a good place to kind of start and getting all those electrolytes in there as well. So that's kind of how you can fuel the 2 to 3 days out from the race with the carbo loading and the electrolyte loading. The day before the race, what I would suggest doing is trying to have an earlier dinner because there's going to be an earlier start in the morning. So having dinner somewhere between 5 to 6 p.m. And the dinner the night before the race, you really want to focus on easy to digest carbs and protein. Don't worry about the color, so the fiber. We want to limit the fiber as much as we can, really that whole day before the race. So not too many servings of fruits or vegetables, definitely not doing a salad with dinner. focusing on something like, rice and chicken or tofu, an easy to digest pasta dish. So I wouldn't do like a really heavy creamy sauce or a really heavy like, bolognese sauce. I would probably err on the side of something like pesto with chicken, something a little bit lighter that's going to digest a little bit easier. And then before you go to bed, you can have a little snack that's high in carbs. So this could be something like yogurt with fruit. It could be a muffin. You can do oatmeal, a bagel, something like that before you go to bed. That's going to help top off energy stores with those extra carbs. So that's typically what fueling should look like starting a few days out from the race. And remember, it's the most important thing to fuel consistently throughout your training, not just the day before the race. So really continue to practice those fueling strategies, continue fueling well during your taper week, up those carbs and electrolytes just a few days out, and then make sure the day before the race you're limiting fiber and getting plenty of carbs from easy to digest sources.